Let's bring in Chris DeGaulle.
He is Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Host of the Chris DeGaulle Show.
So let's bring in talk radio host Chris DeGaulle.
Also, his podcast is a must-listen every day. Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
And host of the Chris DeGaulle Show.
Let's bring in Chris DeGaulle.
Please welcome Chris DeGaulle.
The Chris DeGaulle Podcast is presented by USMedicalPlan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at USMedicalPlan.com.
Well, hey there, how do you do? And welcome into the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. I appreciate you subscribing and downloading this show and making it a destination with regularity. It means a ton to us. I know there are a lot of places you could be. And it really helps us when you leave that 5-star review and that written review at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you have the time to scroll down to the bottom of the menu of shows and leave 5 stars, that helps us grow a lot. And of course, if you ever want to pass this show around to somebody else, we're always grateful for you spreading the word, because your endorsement of this show means more than anything I can do myself in terms of marketing or otherwise. So thank you very much. And thanks for supporting the sponsors who make this show possible, like John Ruhlman, the guy that runs USMedicalPlan.com. And he wants to talk to you if buying health insurance is something you dread or you're doing and you think, I can't afford it, it's breaking me. I'm a small business guy. I want to treat my employees well. Or maybe you're somebody who has 2 or 3 employees, not a whole staff, but just 2 or 3, and you still want to give them health insurance, but it's costly. Look, have you shopped group insurance with John? USMedicalPlan.com works with 80 different private health insurers around the country, so John will shop and compare what you're currently paying. He's not going to give you cut rate coverage either. This is the thing that a lot of people worry about. They say, well, okay, if John gets me a cheaper rate, does that mean I'm not going to be covered as well? No. In fact, what John has told me a lot is he gets on the phone with people who complain about how much they're paying, and then he tells them, you know what, and you're not really getting the kind of coverage you think you're getting. So John does 2 things right away. He assesses the insurance you have, tells you whether the coverage is any good or not, then immediately goes to work to find you something less expensive with as good as or better than coverage that you currently have. So if you're a small business, if you are an individual, if you're a senior citizen, if you're a young person and you need supplemental coverage, or you just need a policy that you don't have at all, please reach out for just a couple of minutes and talk to John's team about it. They also have a great customer care program so that you're not doing bureaucratic nonsense, waiting on the phone, back billing and paperwork and blah, blah, blah. I love that John is a one-stop shop and a full resource for all your insurance needs, affordability, and full coverage. That is the name of his game. He's a young father himself, so that matters to him. It matters to me, and him taking great care of this audience is the most important thing to me. So cheaper insurance, better coverage, USMedicalPlan.com, USMedicalPlan.com, or 877-410-4321. Today marks 80 years since D-Day, 80 years. And I will tell you that I will always look at these celebrations, these celebrations of the men. It was a grisly, awful day, heroic day, but lost so many heroes and patriots, and they're all buried in the American military cemetery in Normandy. But you go there if you ever get the chance, and I did years ago, get to go with a group of listeners, and it is unlike anything I've ever experienced as an American. The patriotism that swells within you is something that I will never forget, and every time I see these June 6th commemorative events, I'm reminded of going back there. And, at any time you go, soon, I wouldn't wait too much longer, but anytime you go or have gone in the last decades, odds are you're going to see someone who served in that war who's still living. And there are a handful of them left. There aren't many left, but there are a handful of them left. And they're given what are called honor flights, free of charge. And I don't exactly remember the organization who does it. I think there are a couple or 3 that do these, where free of charge they will fly one of these veterans and a member of their family to Normandy for these commemorative events. And for many of these men who are most in their, 90s now, this is the first time they've been back on that soil since they charged those beaches or were part of that original invasion 80 years ago. And if you're ever there, again, you better hurry if you're going to go and experience this particular thing, because these guys aren't going to live much longer. When we were there, what would this have been? Was it the 70th anniversary? It doesn't matter. Anyway, these honor guard flights are going on all year long. It just so happened that we were there for the commemorative events on June 6th, the year we took the trip. And some of these guys had come back. And to shake their hand as they're visiting the graves of their buddies, their compatriots who served and didn't make it out of there, and they did, and this was their first time back on those grounds. I defy you to not become emotional. I defy you to not become emotional watching these, at that time, I guess, late 80s, early 90s guys standing there saluting, remembering, considering their friends, considering their fallen fellow soldiers. It really is the most memorable thing that I have ever experienced as an American citizen. And I take it with me every time I hear the word Normandy, every time I hear the word World War II or D-Day. All I hear is one of those words, and it takes me immediately back to that American military cemetery on the cliff. And it's a beautiful setting. I didn't really understand it or even understand what the setting was. This cemetery is on a cliff. They're literally it's the top of a cliff that these men scaled after jumping out into the water, running up the beach, then scaling a cliff. And Germans are mounted right on the cliff, shooting down into the water, shooting onto the beach. There were just so many of them, the Germans couldn't possibly kill them all. And so many of these guys, the Army Rangers in particular, scaling the cliffs to get to the top of the thing, and then, in some cases, hand-to-hand combat. I mean, it's the stuff of, like, Rambo, Die Hard movies. It's stuff human beings don't do. You almost can't even believe it happened. You read about it, and then you see it, and you think, how in the world? It's the most amazing, heroic feat when you see it laid out like that I have ever seen. And maybe there are people that would quibble that there are other military exercises that have been more heroic. I don't know which they would have been. You imagine being a 19-year-old kid being asked to run up a beach. Now, there are guys up there on top of that cliff that are going to be firing down on you when you jump out into the water and start running up this beach and try to get to the cliff so that they can't fire directly on you. And then I need you to scale up the cliff and try to take the guys out with the guns at the top. Okay? Ready? Break. You're 19. You want to go back to being 19 and imagine being told that? But these guys did. And that some of them still live with us today and can tell the story. And that they get to take this trip on this 80th anniversary. And what is so cool, I'll just say, again, if you ever get the chance, I hope you do, there's a little village throughout Normandy, France. It's a very rural part of the world. I didn't know that either. I didn't really have a sense of I'd never been to France, ever. We flew in and we stayed in Paris for a few days, and that's obviously very metropolitan and busy. And then you get on a bus, and Normandy's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's, I don't know, Fast Eddie, it's a bit like if you boarded a bus in Center City, Philadelphia, and the bus took you out in the middle of Lancaster County. It's kind of that. It's like you're not going anywhere. There's nothing to do. Maybe there's a Motel 6, and that's about, there's no restaurants, there's no city, there's nothing. It's just, you're out in the middle of country and farm fields. People have little rural inns and things like that. But in these communities, and much like any rural community here, there are little villages. And one of them is Saint-Marie-Église. And some really amazing stuff happened there. I'm not going to go through it all because, number one, my memory is not great, and I'll screw up some of the details. And some of you World War II buffs will correct me anyway, so I'm not going to try. But Saint-Marie-Église is one of the little villages closest to the actual site where, again, guys are dropping in via parachute overnight, mind you, before this advance in the morning. So you get guys flying in the dark of night, jumping out of planes via parachute in the pitch black. Germans know they're coming, or anticipate that might be what they try, so they physically flood farm fields, knowing that these guys are going to be jumping in the dark and can't see anything, and when they land, they'll just get stuck in effectively quicksand, and guys literally drown in farm fields. They still can't find the remains of some Americans today. Guys who jumped out of a plane in the dark of night with a parachute and just got stuck on a farm field and drowned. I mean, and these Germans, you read about how the Germans were thinking. Like, they anticipated as best they could in every creative way they possibly could. How are the Americans going to come at us? And they set the most intricate booby traps, the most deadly, heinous, rotten. I mean, these people were evil, and they thought it through. They were like, okay, if they do this, then what do we do? And they'd set a trap, and they slaughtered countless Americans. But what they could not have imagined was the D-Day operation. They had no idea. It would never have occurred to anybody that over in England, they're building docks, flotillas, movable docks that they ship in overnight. They build a floating dock in the middle of the water so that these guys can hop out on them. Tanks and munitions and other things can hop out on these docks in shallow enough water to advance up on the beach. This was the way they were going to surprise these guys, what they called mulberries. It is a stunning, and I must say in school I didn't ever learn this story. So as I'm really listening and reading the details of it for the first time, it sounds nuts. You're going to build a floating dock in the middle of the water the day we're going to storm the beaches where the Germans are standing. And we're just going to take it. We're just going to go and see what happens. Yep, that's the plan. Ready? Go. I mean, can you imagine? That sounded nuts. It sounds nuts today, but it worked. It worked. And they just, by sheer volume and will, they flood those beaches, they storm those cliffs, they take out those Germans, they drive them back into France, and they liberate the country and then eventually the continent. And one of the closest little villages, as I was saying, didn't forget my place, one of the closest little villages to this initial scene, this initial D-Day invasion, is a place called Sainte-Marie-Église. And the coolest thing about this little village is they do simulated paratrooper jumps every D-Day. They turn their little village into, you know, every small town has some sort of festival, the pumpkin festival, the mushroom festival, the mosquito festival, whatever. Their festival is the D-Day festival. And that little town and little villages like it throughout Normandy, France, are the first to be liberated as the American boys come through their towns and start driving the Germans out who are occupying all their little towns. Now, can you imagine the delight of being this occupied little town by the Nazis, and then in come the Allied forces? It wasn't just Americans, it was British and whatnot as well. Can you imagine being in these little towns and then in come the good guys? And they run the bad guys out of your little town. These little towns, 80 years later, this is a multi-generational story that they tell to friends and family. So even if the original people living in these little communities aren't alive anymore, they've told their kids and they've told their kids. So these little towns are swelling with love for the United States. And you don't know it because you assume that everybody in Europe just hates the United States. That may have been what you've been told, and, you know, that we're ogres and we're rude and we're obnoxious and Europeans are so much more sophisticated and they don't like us vulgar Westerners. Not if you go to Normandy. You go there and it's like the red carpet is laid out for anything and all things American. I was stunned when we were there on D-Day years ago. I believe it was the 70th. This entire town is American flags. French citizens who live in this little town dress up in American vintage military costume. And they're singing Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. And it's all American fare. You know, the military left a lot of jeeps and tanks and equipment and things after this invasion, and the war was over. Americans left it. The French restored tons of it, put much of it in museums. There are museums lining the French coast. I mean, you will find up and down all of the, you know, not just Normandy, but I believe there are 7 different beaches the Allied forces advanced on D-Day, from north to south, up and down the French coast. And each of these beach communities have their own World War II monuments and museums of the Allied forces advanced that day. But this little town of Sainte-Marie-Église, it is a party. They got like a town square. the whole thing shuts down. It's American flags everywhere. It's American music playing. It's street carnival, food, tiny little thing in the middle of nowhere, France. I had never heard of it. I knew nothing of it. And these people love the United States so much. Their very existences as a little community, they know, are thanks to the American forces that stormed those beaches that day. They know they'd be speaking German today were it not the efforts of this day. Hell, we all would be. Were it not for the bravery of those men on that day, this day, 80 years ago, in this crazy plan, crazy, it can't possibly work. And they said, it's the best we can do. They've swallowed the entire continent. The only thing we can do is just storm the beach and hope for the best. And they kicked their asses. And 80 years later, these French people are still as grateful and celebratory. And these little town streets are lined with old American military jeeps and old military equipment from the United States. And they're all wearing old military regalia. It looks like you're in the scene of a 1940s American town. So I've been watching some video and some footage of the events over there and remembering my own visit. What a special day this must be. People come in from all over the world, and I met groups of American tourists, families who'd come in to watch their sons and daughters simulate the airdrop. They'll fly over this little village, and different military men and women from different divisions around the country and world will come into this little town of Saint-Marie-Église, and they put on a paratrooper jump, a simulated paratrooper jump. And so you watch these big planes fly over the village at a set time, and then you'll watch these guys jump out of the back of a plane, in a line. I don't know if you've ever watched that. I've never seen that until I was there. They do it with great precision. It's just one guy after another just falling out of the back of the plane and then watching these chutes drop. And you start to imagine it, although in the dark. This was in broad daylight. I'm imagining this in the dark. They don't have the sophisticated equipment we have today. They can't see anything. Can you imagine hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, you being one, jumping out into the black of night, not even knowing where you're going to land? And in this little town of Saint-Marie-Église, there is a church, huge steeple. And on it is a mannequin dressed in military fatigues, and there's a big story behind it, and the details of which escape me at the moment, but I know there was an old vintage movie made of it. As the Americans are storming the beaches and moving into France and taking this little town of Saint-Marie-Église back, and there's fighting in the streets, one of those paratroopers, his parachute, as he was coming into the town, got caught on the steeple of this church. And I wish I could remember his name, and I'm sorry, you history buffs are going to kill me for this. But they hang this mannequin in military fatigues from a parachute and hang it off the steeple of this church so that you have the visual representation of this guy. I kind of chuckle at it in one sense. There's just violence all around him. American boys and British boys are fighting with Nazis in this town to take it over, and this poor guy is hanging from a church steeple because he's just jumped in overnight and he's just stuck. He can't go anywhere. And again, I forget, The Longest Day or something. Sorry, I know you guys are going to correct me. It's just amazing. I mean, these guys are just made of stuff that I know most people aren't today. Certainly not me, and I don't know. You ask yourself, do we have the stuff? Do our boys have the stuff today to pull something like that off? Do we have the stones? Could we do it? Would we do it? And you see these old men who still live, who go over there for the first time in 80 years to pay tribute to that day, to their fallen brothers, and remember their own role in it. And boy, how your heart doesn't just swell with pride. And then, of course, they advanced on into Europe. There's a tremendous American military cemetery in Luxembourg, which I did not know, and that's where Patton and his remains were left or buried. It is something I will never forget. And if you get the chance, I would so strongly encourage you, spend the money, take the family, take kids to understand what happened there on that day. It's a beautiful setting. There's a quote when you enter that cemetery that I just love. It's etched in marble, and I'm going to shorthand it, though. I shouldn't. I really want to get it right. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Probably can't. Well, I'll find it when I get back. But the point of it is that was never meant to be a operation of conquest. That was a liberation event. That was not to take over a continent. And that's what people forget. You know, when we hear the modern American leftists today, these young, stupid kids screaming that we're occupiers or that Israel is occupiers, that we're advancing to conquer something, that's the greatness of this country. We're not out to conquer anything. We're not out to take or conquer or seize anything. We went to liberate a continent. Yes, keep them from crossing the ocean and coming to our shores as well, but we went to liberate a continent. And we had to burn the damn thing to the ground. We had to destroy that continent. Paris had to be leveled. London had to be leveled. It was deadly. It was bad. It wasn't easy. It wasn't like we went in and kicked a couple of butts and the Germans went yipe, yipe, yiping back to Germany and surrendered. It was nasty. It was ugly. But we won. And then we helped them rebuild. And then we went home. At great personal cost, lives lost, tons and tons of money. But we liberated a people, we rebuilt their community, and then we handed it back. All those men buried in that cemetery, all those lives lost, simply to liberate others, to free others. It was not to benefit them. It wasn't even really to benefit the United States in the immediate. And that's why I object so vociferously. That's why I react so negatively. That's why I get so angry and heartsick. And that's why I have so little tolerance and time for these pipsqueaks in American streets calling us the bad guy, calling us occupiers, calling us colonizers. Thousands and thousands and thousands of our dead boys are buried in those American military cemeteries in Europe. And they didn't go there to conquer Luxembourg. They didn't go there to conquer France. They went there to liberate it, and then they wanted to come home, and they didn't get to. Some of those boys did. And now 80 years later, they go back to remember what they did there and pay tribute to their fallen brothers. And if that doesn't stir in you a sense of patriotism and pride in your country, I would check your pulse. And if any of these malcontents in American streets calling us names and running us down actually understood that, I'd like to believe they'd have a change of heart. I'd like to believe most of these people, like me, are just ignorant of that history and don't really understand it. I would wish that every American had that immersive experience that I was fortunate enough to have on D-Day years ago, because it will change your perspective about this country's greatness forever. It's odd, I say this often, it took me going to France, a rural town in France, to really understand the greatness of the United States. Excellence in dentistry. That's what you're going to get at Williamsburg Dental. My friend Bob Spinato is back on the phone. He's in Broomall, just off the Blue Route. And with 2 new associates, now you can expand and offer more hours, maybe evening hours, possibly weekends, Bob.
Yeah, one of the things that I told them from early on when they started with me was the value of not only their own time, but other people's times. And they run on a similar schedule that I do. If you've got a 1 o'clock appointment, you're in their chair at 1 o'clock. And it's something that across the board at Williamsburg Dental, we really pride ourselves on, whether it's an appointment with the hygienist or whether it's an appointment with one of our doctors. The other thing is we now have some expanded hours in the evenings, and even there's some discussion about opening again on some Saturdays for services.
Yeah, so, but not you. You're fishing. You're not kidding anybody. It's not you going to be working on Saturday. Come on,
Well, I'm in my 33rd year, and it should be the young guns.
That's so right. You've earned it. You've earned it.
I feel like I have. Thank you.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. Byron Donalds. I'm actually really glad. Fast Eddie did some reconnaissance work this week. You know, we were talking on this show about the cigar event that Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt hosted with Michelle Tafoya in Philadelphia, and it was done, Wesley Hunt told us, ostensibly to reach out to the black community of Philadelphia. At the 11th hour, we were asked to go, and then Fast Eddie decided, all right, I'll go, and he made a voyage into Center City to be a part of this evening, and I was glad he did. He and I were talking about this. I said how to go, and I didn't really intend to talk much about it. And I was actually really curious that the Philadelphia Inquirer actually did a profile write-up on this visit. And it wasn't initially a hit piece. To be fair to, I think it was Julia Taruso who wrote the piece, it was just a straight-ahead bit of journalism. Byron Donalds, Wesley Hunt, two black congressmen, they're coming to Philadelphia. They're hosting an event to try to speak directly to black folks. Fair, accurate, let it go. Didn't have much to say about it. The event happened. Didn't have much to say about it, but I thought, boy, this is unusual. Black Republicans trying to talk conservative and Republican politics to other blacks in Philadelphia, and the media isn't piling on. That seems unusual, I thought to myself, but I thought, okay, well, maybe it's a new day, or maybe we got lucky, or maybe they're distracted with other things, and I moved on. Well, I got ahead of myself. Headline today at the Philadelphia Inquirer, Representative Byron Donalds draws backlash for expressing nostalgia for Jim Crow era at Philadelphia event. Now, Byron Donalds, again, is a black man. And so without reading a sentence of this story, the headline implies black man Byron Donalds came to Philadelphia and spoke lovingly about an era of segregation known as Jim Crow. Now, does that make any sense to you on its face without reading a sentence of the story? Is that the stupidest thing you've ever heard? A black man came to Philadelphia to extol the virtues of segregation.
Of course, that sounds stupid.
It's ridiculous. I didn't read this. I mean, I didn't read it. I laughed when I saw it, and I said, well, I'm going to ask Fast Eddie about it, because Fast Eddie actually went. You were and I'm really glad you ended up going on a reconnaissance mission, a fact-finding mission. I'm glad you were there. What I thought would be nothing ended up being something. So they're lying about Byron Donalds coming to town and trumpeting and celebrating segregation. So you were there. What did you hear?
I mean, honestly, Chris, the event itself leaned heavy on the black family. That was something, I think, a topic that was very important for Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt to get across in that evening. And he's saying that the family is coming back, like the black, I guess, nuclear family is coming back in America, and that's part of like this outreach. It's, it was just like that was the heavy emphasis from that event. So I guess when he had said this specific thing about the quote Jim Crow era, like I understood what he was saying in that, he brought like, so the family has diminished, and what he was saying was that through like Lyndon Johnson and all like what the Democrats have done to black voters over time has diminished that. And what he's saying is he's seeing a return to it. That's how he's raising his family.
Representative Byron Donalds has come under fire for comments made about the Jim Crow era of racial segregation. The comments, first reported Tuesday night in the Inquirer, came as the Congress Cognac and Cigars event featuring Wesley Hunt and Byron Donalds came to town, both men, black conservative Republicans. The event was the first in a series aimed at helping the GOP reach black voters, blah, blah, blah. Joe Biden's campaign and other Democrats attacked Donalds yesterday for appearing to praise the Jim Crow era. Appearing to praise. Now, Sean Collins Walsh, who wrote this piece, frames it in the story as appearing to praise, and the headline, Byron Donalds draws backlash for expressing nostalgia for Jim Crow. So he did or he appeared to, Sean? Seems to matter, the context here, doesn't it? Here's what Donalds said, they wrote. One of the things that's actually happening in our culture that you're now starting to see in our politics is the reinvigoration of black family with younger black men and black women, and it is also helping to breathe the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And Lyndon Johnson, you go down that road, and now here we are. Donald's referring to Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program, which included civil rights legislation that ended Jim Crow and expanded federal food stamp, welfare, housing programs. He did not discuss the Jim Crow-era policies that enabled disenfranchisement and segregation. Now, he was using, just reading that. Well, you know what? We've got the clip. Why don't we just play what he actually said? We have the actual audio since we were physically there. Here's the actual audio of what they're reporting on.
I grew up with my mom. My dad and my mom, things didn't work out. As an adult, I look at my father and I say, bro, I don't know what happened, but you my father and I love you. Wow. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. Wow. But I'm going to tell you this. Growing up, the one thing I knew I wanted to do, and this is not about my father, this is about what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a father to my son. Wow. And so one of the things that's actually happening in our culture, which you're now starting to see in our politics, is the reinvigoration of black families with younger black men and black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. That's right. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people are always a bit conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth. I'm looking at my kids. How can my kids be on my shoulders when they take off in life? That's what's happening.
Now, in any of that, did you hear him say Jim Crow segregation was better for us as black people? In what world do you listen to that and say he was pining away for the days of Jim Crow? Now, he used it as a frame of reference, a time frame. He said that during the era of Jim Crow, black families were tighter. Black families were more conservative during the era of Jim Crow. Is he saying he wants to go back to the segregation of Jim Crow, or is that a statement of fact? It's a statement of fact. Black families were tighter and closer and more conservative in the Jim Crow era. That's a fact. Now, can we parse why that was or what his thinking is? I'd like to have him back so that he can expand on that. But every fair-minded person knows he was not suggesting that the country should go back to segregation to make black families more intact. That's perverse. Was there anyone in the room? I was listening to the clip, Fast Eddie. You were physically there. Was there anyone in the room who raised their hand and said, "Excuse me, are you suggesting we go back to segregation, Congressman Donalds?" I doubt anybody did, because that's clearly not what he was saying.
No, Chris. There were cheers for he was being cheered on by the people in the audience, and this was, I would say, the room was 80% black. That's what the event was for. I was only invited, as media. So. Yeah, he evoked emotion, like people in the middle. I think you may have even heard it, just like, yeah, from the front row there. So gross. So gross. Here's one other thing I guess I'll get into while we're on it. I'm kind of loath to do this. Julie Kelly visited the show yesterday. And we were talking very specifically about a gentleman that she has locked horns with in her reporting recently, a former federal agent, former FBI guy, a guy called Kyle Seraphin, who now does a show. And he's been on this show. He's been on several of my colleagues' shows. I don't know Kyle Seraphin. All right, I don't know him. I have no personal feelings about him.
in fact, I went back and listened to the segment yesterday because I wanted to be very, very clear and sure that I was being accurate here. I said on a couple of different occasions during the conversation with Julie Kelly yesterday, and if you didn't hear it, I'll shorthand this and say that Julie did some reporting a couple of weeks ago that she uncovered some documents during the Mar-a-Lago raid that suggest use of force, some highly unusual use of force tactics were going to be implemented at Mar-a-Lago, that there were protocols in place if the FBI encountered Secret Service or even Trump himself, and the deadly force could be used if necessary. This was all reported. It came from Julie Kelly's reporting. My understanding of this is that guys like Kyle Seraphin, who now do his own kind of show, and he is a former FBI agent, went after Julie publicly. They've been friends with Julie. They've liked Julie. But for whatever reason, decided publicly to go after Julie for being irresponsible in her reporting because don't you know that every FBI raid contains this very same element? And you're misleading people by suggesting that the use of deadly force being deployed at the Mar-a-Lago raid is any different than any other raid. And you're misrepresenting this to whip people up and stir up cliques. This became a public spat between this former agent who now does a show and Julie Kelly. I went back and listened to the discussion yesterday, and what I have said, and you know this, is I'm deeply concerned about subversive elements inside conservative media, whatever that is. I've never really used names. In fact, Kyle's is the first name that's ever come up specifically. And I said, I don't know the man. I don't know his intentions. I can't say it for sure. But what I said ultimately is I conclude that when you start attacking people from within, when you start attacking people for their reporting on an overly aggressive, overzealous FBI, and you start saying things like, you're just trying to get clickbait, and seemingly coming to the aid and defense of the FBI, here's my initial position. I become suspicious of you. I think that's weird. Fast Eddie, is that an unreasonable or unusual position given where we sit in 2024? Do you think it's odd or unusual to respond negatively to someone attacking someone, one, who I believe to be truthful and honest because I know her personally, but someone, two, who has done nothing but try to uncover the abuses of this system against American citizens? That's all she's done. She's devoted her career to uncovering the abuses of the system against average Americans. So when a former federal agent who now does his own show starts attacking her publicly as clickbait and misrepresenting the FBI's operational procedures, do you blame me for becoming suspicious?
Not at all, Chris. No, I don't.
And so I said as much. I don't know him. I don't know him. So I don't know his heart. I don't know what is true. I can't speak to it. And in fact, I clarified that twice. I don't know him, but I said I'm suspicious. I was clear. Can I tell you something? And this is the last I'm going to talk about this. I have been carpet bombed by Kyle Seraphin relatives, advocates, friends, surrogates, his father in the last 24 hours. Carpet bombed. Like I've never been carpet bombed about any segment I've ever done. Carpet bombed about the goodness of Kyle Seraphin and why I'm a rat bastard for allowing Julie and I, by association, to imply that he's a bad guy and that I owe him an apology. So what's your reaction to that? May I just, and his father, who I assume I'll take it at face value, I don't know. I mean, I get an email yesterday. It's a long email from a man who claims to be his father, giving me the entire backstory on Kyle and why he's great, why he's a Boy Scout, why I've misrepresented him, and why, as a Christian, I'm duty and honor bound to correct myself and clarify the record that Kyle's a great guy. And then all of his old buddies, FBI buddies, military buddies, and by the way, a couple of my colleagues literally this morning texting me, I can't believe what you guys were saying about Kyle Seraphin. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Okay, so you and I have not discussed this, Fast Eddie. Again, you're the executive producer of the show. I believe we've had Mr. Seraphin on the program. You heard yesterday's show. You can go back and review it in the podcast if you'd like. Is Mr. Seraphin due an apology from the show? You're the executive producer. You tell me.
He's not doing an apology from the show, no.
Did I slander him? Did I attack him? Did I make... Now, I said broadly that I think there are people that are subversive entities in conservative media, and I thought it odd that he's come on with this huge following. I mean, I had people DMing me yesterday saying, you know, Bongino had him on. That's why he has an audience now. Bongino put him on.
Is that the standard? Is that what we're doing? Like, okay, so Dan, let's go by that then. Dan Bongino had Kyle Seraphin on, so now he's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Julie Kelly is your friend of many years in this. I mean, we've gone through,
and Dan's had her on too, by the way.
Exactly. Mr. Seraphin, of course, is welcome to come on and explain why he took umbrage with you and Julie's conversation, but no, there is no that platform. Of course, would be offered, but as far as an apology goes, no. Chris, we have seen so much pop up over the past few years in our space. I've never seen anything like it, and you know the way you describe it, like these sets, this high production quality value, like all. And then there's just people that come out of nowhere. And then you'll see, again, like Tucker Carlson go on some podcast. You're like, I don't even know what that podcast is.
Yeah.
And you go, and it's just like hundreds of thousands of people. It's just, this has all happened very fast.
Yeah, and I don't begrudge anyone's success. I have nothing personal against Mr. Seraphin or anyone else who's had success out there. Good for you. But for you to just swoop in and ask that I trust you and that you're pure as the wind-driven snow, and my friend of many years who I trust and I know genuinely is trying to do well and do it right. Not that she's perfect and not that she doesn't get it wrong. But if we're all on the same side, which ostensibly we are, I thought we were. I mean, if this guy is an FBI whistleblower and he's now committed to truth, justice, and the American way, and he's a Boy Scout out there, beating back the villains that have taken over the United States government, doesn't it seem odd to go headlong after Julie Kelly publicly when she reports that the FBI was overly aggressive in raiding a former president's home? Doesn't it seem odd to go after her, calling her clickbait for reporting what was in court documents, what was physically able to be seen by all of us? Is there, in what universe do you defend the Mar-a-Lago raid? In what universe do you say, this is standard operating protocol? So, yes, let me just say this. To Mr. Seraphin, you are absolutely welcome on this show. In fact, Fast Eddie, I'd like you to extend an invitation. It seems that he has a huge, huge fan club, including family, who are very, very interested in me correcting the record. Sometimes I forget the reach, power, and influence of this show. You would think, because we're total strangers, they would say, well, that's a guy saying something, whatever, and move on. But they seem very, very interested in making sure that I correct the record about Mr. Seraphin. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. There are quite literally half a dozen people demanding that I clear Mr. Seraphin's good name. Although I went back and listened to it, I didn't attack him. He and Julie have something personal. I said, I find it weird. I don't know his intentions. I don't know his heart. I don't know him. I can't say for sure what motivates him. I don't know. I just said I think it's weird. So, Mr. Seraphin is invited to this show. I would love to discuss this with him. And my very simple question, and I'll give him prep time so that he can come here knowing exactly what I want to know right off the top. Why is it you saw fit to publicly go after Julie for reporting about what was an extraordinary raid of a former president's home and use the force that was used? Why did you feel it necessary to go after Julie Kelly publicly? Instead of phone her, call her, text her, DM her. You had all of her contacts. You used to communicate privately. Why make this a public thing instead of just deal with it privately and say, hey, Julie, you got it wrong? I have other questions, which I'll ask Mr. Seraphin if he's willing to come here. But since there has been an abundance of interest, including from colleagues, I'm literally getting texts from colleagues this morning, kind of demanding that I backpedal and apologize. And I will just tell you this. In my entire career, I've never experienced this. This doesn't really help me with my suspicions, to be very honest. This extraordinarily aggressive, weird PR campaign about a total stranger I don't know, coming at this show, demanding that I clarify and defend and explain and promote and whatever. Kyle, Okay. Weird. Really weird, but all right. I'll do it. For Mr. Seraphin Sr., for Mr. Seraphin himself, for all my friends and colleagues that are apparently suggesting that I was part of some sort of slanderous attack on Mr. Seraphin's reputation yesterday. Mr. Seraphin is welcome on this show, and we'll just have a discussion about what Julie said yesterday. And I asked that initial question, gave him total prep time, to be fair, so he knows exactly what I'm going to ask him. Then I have some follow-up questions. But, Ed, I got to tell you something. In my entire career, I have never experienced something quite like this. I woke up this morning to just bombardment from people demanding that I am, Kyle Seraphin is due some kind of clarification or apology from this show. So.
No, Chris, I don't understand this inside sniping at one another among conservatives. This is something that has to stop. Yep. I'm really, really tired of this because I'll tell you what, seeing John Fetterman as a United States Senator has really pissed me off. Yeah. Seeing Josh Shapiro as my governor has really pissed me off after COVID. And I don't understand why we're taking each other out. It seems like it's happening daily now.
Yeah. Joe Biden and Merrick Garland are my problem. I don't know about Julie Kelly, and I don't know about Kyle Seraphin. Joe Biden and Merrick Garland are my problem. Not Mr. Seraphin and not Miss Kelly. If they have a problem with one another, so be it. I don't know their hearts. I can't know their hearts. Only God knows their hearts and their motivations. I can look at something and think it odd. The goons in power are my concern.
At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle we hold sacred, and that's free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish, allowing ideas to flourish, debates to ignite, and progress to be made. Without it, our pursuit of liberty, our ability to challenge, or our capacity to innovate, it would be really constrained. Now, in today's digital age, the very platform that should democratize information is being allowed to narrow the spectrum of ideas we're exposed to. Really important discussions about our wealth, our rights, our future, systemically silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are really crucial to your financial independence and your security. And that's where the company Wealth Protection Research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. I want to be clear about that. They're defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silenced. In an era where dialogues about retirement, investments, economic freedoms are increasingly censored, Wealth Protection Research is focused on ensuring that diverse, controversial, and revolutionary ideas also get a platform. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts through leaders and thought leaders, trailblazers, all who've been pushed to the margins by mainstream media and tech platforms like Facebook and Google. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, offering fresh, often contrarian perspectives on protecting and growing your wealth, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of this coming election. By spotlighting these thinkers, people like Jim Rickards or Porter Stansberry, Wealth Protection Research is not just sharing financial advice, they're fostering a movement toward a more open, informed, and free society. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report, and it's a completely free report. It highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election, and it also contains ideas the mainstream media doesn't want to touch. Listeners to this show can get this whole thing completely free if you text the word ideas to 76626. Just text ideas to 76626, and if you do that today, you're also going to get a free gold investment kit from Wealth Protection Research. And the sponsor of that is Augusta Precious Metals, by the way, and we appreciate that. So just text ideas to 76626. If you're like me and you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text ideas to 76626. Claim your free copy of this 2024 election report. You know, it's time to widen the scope of what we're told. You know we believe that here. Here are the ideas that establishment folks can't handle and don't think you can handle. Take control of your own financial destiny. Text ideas to 76626 to claim your free copy. The battle for free speech is the battle for our future, and Wealth Protection Research ensures that the ideas capable of shaping our financial well-being are available to all of us who want to hear them. So don't wait. Grab your free report right now. Text IDEAS to 76626 and claim your free copy. You know, apropos of nothing really, it's just I felt like I wanted to follow this up because it was something that I brought to you before, and that was the United Methodist Church's recent vote and decision to embrace gay clergy, which with that comes the sanctioning of gay marriage. I told you that the global United Methodist Church had staved this off for a very long time because of the continent of Africa and other conservative, traditional, Bible-believing Methodist nations and continents. When they gather together, they say no, and they outnumber the North American Methodists. Well, the North American Methodists this time got clever and decided, how about we just hold a vote and exclude all those people from out of the country and off the continent? We'll just not count the Africans this time, was effectively what they decided. And so, shazam, they got their wish and voted, and now the United Methodist Church, one of the biggest Protestant denominations in the world, is now in the middle of a split. And I wanted to call your attention to this story. What has it been? Just 2 or 3 weeks after I mentioned this to you? From the Blaze this morning, United Methodist Church loses more than 1 million members in a single day. Whoa. In one fell swoop last week, the United Methodist Church lost more than 1 million members. Weeks after the Methodist Church voted to allow the LGBTQ practicing clergy and reversing their stance on same-sex marriage, the Methodist Church of the Ivory Coast voted just late last month, May 28th, to leave the United Methodist Church. This is not an emotional issue, but a matter of unchangeable truth. It's about clear sin. The West African Methodists made the decision to leave the United Methodist Church for reasons of conscience before God and His Word, the supreme authority in matters of life and faith. The decision of the United Methodist Church to embrace LGBTQ culture and same-sex marriages deviates from the Holy Scriptures. The United Methodist Church is, therefore, sacrificing its honor and integrity to honor the LGBTQ community. In a statement, Benjamin Boney said the UMC is now based on sociocultural and contextual values which have consumed its doctrinal and disciplinary integrity. This is a significant development because it means the United Methodist Church is losing more than 1 million members. Even more important is the fact that Methodism of the conservative or traditional variety, that is Bible-believing variety, is growing in the Ivory Coast. The United Methodist Church in the United States, on the other hand, has seen years of decline, especially as the denomination began embracing liberalism. With 900 churches and 100 preaching points, the church has experienced 7 to 8% annual growth. Its demographic reflects the countries with 60% under 35 and women as the majority, alongside its spiritual mission, the church runs schools, hospitals. This is about Africa. 900 churches and 100 preaching points. The church has experienced 7 to 8% annual growth in Africa. So the Methodists are growing in Africa, and they're hemorrhaging here in the United States. Similarly, traditional Bible-believing churches, in my case, just anecdotally, my Southern Baptist membership church and other Southern Baptist churches that preach the gospel and the Word of God exclusively, they're growing. You will find, and Ed Morrissey, traditional Catholic churches, we talked to him, where you find people practicing the Word of God, preaching the Word of God, getting back to tradition, recognizing sin, atoning for sin. Where you find people doing that, you will find life, you will find vibrancy, you will find growth. And where you find the embrace of this culture and the things of this world, you will find decay and degradation, memberships dropping, money drying up, weakness. Over the last several years, back to the story, the United Methodist Church congregations in the United States have disaffiliated from the United Methodist Church, joining the Global Methodist Church or remaining independent. The Korean Methodist Church, which boasts approximately 1.5 million members, could soon also be on its way out of the United Methodist Church. Homosexuality cannot be accepted, they said in a statement. This is not an emotional issue, but a matter of unchangeable truth. Homosexuality is a sin,
said the Korean Methodists last month in a statement. This is an issue concerning the sanctity of life, and the church must teach correctly without compromise. You know, Christine and I have told you, my wife Christine and I do a podcast separately and apart from this show. And it's called Making the Leap. And we traditionally deal with education and encouraging you to, if you have a public school kid, seek out options out there. And we talk a lot about faith-based schools, and if that's not your thing, homeschooling or micro schools, there are a ton of options for schooling your kid that don't involve sending him or her off to the buzzsaw of indoctrination camps called the public school. That's our point. That's the reason we do the show, and we explore different themes like that. One of the interviews that we just did, in fact, it's the most recent episode of Making the Leap, and I hope you'll check it out. It's with a woman called Elizabeth Urbanowitz. And she has come up with a curriculum that very specifically addresses how to teach young children this very thing I'm talking about. Our young children, and my kids are included in this, my teenagers are part of this. You've probably dealt with this if you have kids of a certain age. They think telling the truth is mean. Have you encountered that? Being truthful is mean. So if you say, the Bible says this is a sin, our secular culture has taught our kids, well, that's being intolerant and that's being mean. Missing the point entirely that all of us are fallen and all of us sin. It is not a statement of sanctimony when you call out sin. Do you understand? Does everybody understand that? I don't think secular culture does. When we address our sins and the sins of others, it is not about a sanctimonious point of view. I am pious, I am righteous, I am without sin or fault. You're the sinner and the bad person, and you got to get right with God. That's not what it's about. It's about we're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. I need you to hold me accountable. I have to hold myself accountable. I, too, will also address you and your sin and try to hold you accountable. And together, we're going to try to do our best here until we return to be with the Lord. That's the goal. It's not about sanctimony or piousness or righteousness. None of us are. None of us are. But the problem is the guilt people have about their sin is tough to deal with, and so they would rather us become a culture where we just tolerate it, accept it, sanctify it, endorse it. And if we don't do those things, then we're bigots. And kids have begun to learn that you're bigoted if you simply say, I don't agree. And Elizabeth Urbanowitz, in her conversation with us, said a couple of things that I thought was so important. One of her quotes was, our children's natural God-given sense of compassion and justice, and kids do. They don't want to be mean. Kids do not instinctively want to be mean to one another. They are compassionate toward one another. Their natural default position is they want to be tolerant and they don't want to be mean to one another. But they've been exploited by a political movement. That sense of justice and fairness has been exploited by the left and Marxists. And then she said this, we don't want our kids to have the idea that they're never supposed to speak truth, or that the idea that if they speak truth in love, that everything's going to work out fine and everybody will accept it. She also said this false choice has been given to kids where if you don't endorse, if you don't tell someone that their feelings are endorsable and justifiable, you're the bigot, you're hateful. All of those things aren't true, and we've got our work cut out for us because we got to deal with that as adults, and we got to teach our kids that too. Telling somebody the truth of God's word in Scripture is not hateful. It doesn't make me sanctimonious. It's just telling the truth. Now that I've told the truth in love and said, I love you, I want to see you in heaven with me, here's what the good book says about sin. I can't endorse this thing that you want me to endorse because here's what the book says, man. I love you. I'm praying for you. I can't get behind what you're doing. They shout in response, you're just a bigot, an intolerant bigot. God is love, right? That's where we are today in 2024. The churches that are sticking by, here's what the book says, and we're all going to work together to atone, repent, hold one another accountable because we're all fallen, we're all getting it wrong, and we're all going to work together to get better. The churches that are doing that and deferring to the word are growing. The churches that are saying, come one, come all. If it feels good, do it, baby. I'm not here to judge you. God is love. You do you. They're shrinking. And kids, and all of us need to understand, it's very difficult to tell the truth, because when you do, there are going to be people that reject you for doing so. And that's not just spiritually, that's just, as you know, in life, particularly when we're talking about politics. People despise, bad people, ill-intended people, certainly Satan, they hate the truth more than anything else. They hate sunlight, they hate the truth. And they hiss and they writhe and they attack and they try to make you feel bad. And it makes our children very vulnerable to that. So, I don't know. I just felt like revisiting this to, one, share that this very, very prominent, founded by a great, great man, John Wesley, this huge, great, traditional Protestant faith called Methodism is now decaying and splintering and falling apart because of this idea that telling biblical truth is mean and intolerant. It's heartbreaking, but it is biblical, and it's not new, and it's something that we're going to be dealing with well after we're gone.
Hey, Mike Lindell and MyPillow, you know the name. 20 years they've been singing the jingle on Fox News and on the radio, and it's no secret that Mike and the company have come under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of attack. Big box stores have tossed MyPillow from their stores. Even the online retailers now won't sell MyPillow products. And who does that hurt, really? I mean, yeah, I understand they don't like Mike's position on the election or whatever, but Mike employs hundreds of Americans, hundreds of Minnesotans who make great products. If you know the MyPillow products, I sleep on them every night. So does my dog, Dean. They're great products. And he wants to sell them to you at unbelievable prices, by the way, but they're backed with a 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee, and most importantly, again, they're made here in the United States. So, it's not something he's asking me to say. It's just something I'd like to remind you of, that a guy who has an opinion, who happens to own a very successful American company and employs a lot of Americans who make great American products that a lot of you have bought and owned or are looking to buy and own. I just want you to know that while he takes it on the chin a lot out there for having the positions he has, he wants to keep his employees busy. He wants to keep the company moving along, and so he's passing on huge, huge savings to you in what he's calling the $25 extravaganza. Getting the word out, I want to invite you to check out this $25 extravaganza today. 2 multi-pack MyPillows, just $25. MyPillow sandals, just $25. I'm looking at the list of these deals right now. 6-pack towel set, just $25. 6-pack of towels, $25. And the MyPillows with the new Giza fabric, just $25. And here's the thing, if you order any or all of this stuff, if you exceed $75 with your order, he ships it to you for free. So free shipping on anything $75 or over. And look, with all those deals and so many more at just $25 a piece, I think you'll be very, very pleased with not just the quality, but the price point and the free shipping. It's MyPillow.com. I hope you'll use the promo code ChrisPodcast. MyPillow.com, ChrisPodcast, to take advantage of all these savings. Get that free shipping over $75. Or call 800-932-5056. Great operators, American-based operators. You can call and say, hey, I'm with you. And hang in there. 800-932-5056. Don't forget the promo code ChrisPodcast. It lets them know you listen, which I appreciate, but more importantly, get you that deal. MyPillow.com or 800-932-5056. Promo code ChrisPodcast.
We prove the forces of liberty are stronger than the forces of conquest. Here we proved that the ideals of our democracy are stronger than any army or combination of armies in the entire world. We proved something else here as well, the unbreakable unity of the Allies. Here with us are men who served alongside the Americans that day, wearing different flags on their arms, but fighting with the same courage for the same purpose. What the Allies did together 80 years ago far surpassed anything we could have done on our own. was a powerful illustration of how alliances, real alliances, make us stronger. A lesson that I pray we Americans never forget. Together we won the war. We rebuilt Europe, including our former enemies. It was an investment in what became shared and a prosperous future. We established NATO, the greatest military alliance in the history of the world. And over time, you got it, it is. And over time, we brought more nations into NATO, the NATO alliance, including the newest members, Finland and Sweden. Today, NATO stands at 32 countries strong, and NATO is more united than ever, and even more prepared to keep the peace, deter aggression, defend freedom all around the world. America has invested in our alliances and forged new ones, not simply out of altruism, but out of our own self-interest as well. America's unique ability to bring countries together is an undeniable source of our strength and our power. Isolationism was not the answer 80 years ago, and is not the answer today.
Yeah, well, all right. I think we'll leave it there. This speech is very, very hard to hear, given Joe Biden's behavior, isn't it? I think that's the problem. Listening to him talk about the ideals of this country, as those boys represented 80 years ago, it's very rich coming from this guy. We saved Europe from fascism. And now we're living it. We saved Europe from an ideology that guy, this president of ours, we saved Europe from a behavior and an ideology that he embraces today. That's the reality. That's why it's very tough to listen to him stand before these heroes at their marked graves in Normandy and talk this way. Unbreakable unity of allies? Who's the greatest ally we have short of Great Britain? To our east, Israel. And what does he want to do to them? Leave them for dead? Ceasefire, stand down, not defend themselves, all for political expediency. Jailing political opponents, raiding their homes. These living heroes who are sitting behind him as he gives this speech fought to defeat that stuff. Joe Biden and his administration have ushered in the very thing they fought and potentially died to stave off. Very difficult to listen to. So I decided that maybe it would be better today to go back 40 years ago on the 40th commemorative event there in Normandy when Ronald Reagan, who does everything so much better, did it better. Here's some of his speech.
We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. The air is soft, but 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. Their mission was one of the most difficult and daring of the invasion, to climb these sheer and desolate cliffs and take out the enemy guns. The Allies had been told that some of the mightiest of these guns were here, and they would be trained on the beaches to stop the Allied advance. The Rangers looked up and saw the enemy soldiers, the edge of the cliffs, shooting down at them with machine guns and throwing grenades, and the American Rangers began to climb. They shot rope ladders over the face of these cliffs and began to pull themselves up. When one Ranger fell, another would take his place. When one rope was cut, a Ranger would grab another and begin his climb again. They climbed, shot back, and held their footing. Soon, one by one, the Rangers pulled themselves over the top, And in seizing the firm land at the top of these cliffs, they began to seize back the continent of Europe. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. And behind me is a memorial that symbolizes the Ranger daggers that were thrust into the top of these cliffs. And before me are the men who put them there. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. Gentlemen, I look at you and I think of the words of Stephen Spender's poem. You were men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor.
Ronald Reagan, 40 years ago, not far from where the Husk was speaking this morning, Ronald Reagan was standing at the Army Ranger Memorial at Pointe du Hoc, which is a cliff, a point just adjacent to the American military cemetery there in Normandy. And that memorial itself, as Reagan referenced in the speech, is made to be in the shape of the instrument they fired up on the cliff to begin to scale it, if you've ever seen it before. So, on a day like this, it's good to be reminded of, one, heroism, but two, what a real president sounds like, who really reveres the United States and its heroes. Because you just get the sense that the old guy we were just listening to a minute ago, number one, from any given day to the next, doesn't really know where he is, certainly hasn't written or thought a word about what he's uttering, but most of all, doesn't believe it. I mean, I hate to say it, but everything he just said and espoused, he doesn't believe. Ronald Reagan did. So, 80 years this D-Day.
The Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.